Drink Pepsi Black for max taste, no sugar. Pepsi Black time, 18 hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good. With the news, I am Ruth Wilson. Good evening. First, the highlights. David Granger and Joseph Harmon have stepped down from APNU. In the region, Hong Kong authorities have busted a shipment of meat with cocaine from Suriname. And internationally, President Joe Biden has threatened to impose sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin if Russia invades Ukraine. Details of these and other stories in a moment.
After a hard day's work, a lime at the workplace would be great, and even greater and better with KFC, with a wide choice of finger-licking meals in a wide range of sizes. Could be a birthday celebration or promotion, or a lime for no reason at all. Any lime, anytime, anywhere is better and tastier with a delicious meal from any of KFC's 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence, open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
And now for the news in detail. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, was Tuesday elected chairman of the Umbrella, a Partnership for National Unity, APNU, after Mr. David Granger stepped down. APNU General Secretary Joseph Harmon also stepped down as General Secretary of that loosely knit coalition of the PNCR, the major party, and several small and little-known parties. In a statement, APNU says that the two informed the first APNU Executive Council meeting for this year of their decision to demit office. Sources, however, said that Mr. Granger will remain the representative of the list of candidates for APNU Alliance for Change, and so far, Mr. Harmon remains Guyana's opposition leader. It is left to be seen whether Mr. Harmon, not being a PNCR executive member or General Secretary of APNU, will resign from the post of opposition leader. The Executive Council requested that Mr. Harmon continue as General Secretary for 7 days to facilitate the smooth transition to a new General Secretary. However, Mr. Granger demitted office with immediate effect, paving the way for the election of a new chair. Shadow Natural Resources Minister David Patterson and Public Works Minister Juan Edgell are at odds over whether Guyana really needs so much electricity that will be generated by the natural gas power plant. Mr. Patterson says that a study conducted by the Inter-American Development Bank, conducted in 2016 and updated in 2019, he says Guyana's energy demand will be 330 megawatts by 2035. He says the government has projected power demand for the Demerara-Berbice interconnected system, which will be 415 megawatts or an additional 290 megawatts in the next 3 years. Kicking off debate on a motion on the proposed $1.5 billion gas-to-shore facility at Wales, West Bank Demerara, Mr. Patterson said that the government has not provided any evidence showing that Guyana can consume all of that electricity.
However, sir, they have failed to inform the country which industries will be requiring this power. In other words, they are committing the people of Guyana to building a power plant, committing more than $1.5 billion, but they have no end users. As a country, we will be paying for electricity, which we cannot currently utilize, since this supply is nearly 3 times the current demand.
But Public Works Minister Edgell says that housing areas and economic activities, which will be opened up across Guyana, will consume the electricity.
What we would have done, Mr. Speaker, the gas-to-shore project is just one item in a menu of measures for the transformation of Guyana, but it is a very important item, because the main cry of the people of Guyana to see Guyana transform and develop, and the hindrance to that over the years has been the cost of electricity.
Public Works Minister Juan Edgell. The United States has been telling the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Prison Service that they may not be able to receive American assistance if they violate human rights. The U.S. Embassy says that the Department of State's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor trained members of the police force and the prison service. According to the embassy, the training focused on the Department of State's Leahy Law, which prohibits state assistance to foreign security forces if there is credible information that a security force unit has committed a gross violation of human rights. These include extrajudicial killings, torture, forced disappearance, or rape under the color of law. The U.S. mission here says that the training reviewed definitions of grave violation of human rights, the consequences of committing them, and the pathways to remediating units whose members have committed these actions so they may once again receive assistance. Through the United States Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, CBSI, the U.S. Embassy has facilitated the training of 889 police officers in various law enforcement areas. These include major case management, forensic video analysis, narcotics investigations, and intelligence gathering. The embassy says the U.S. is poised to facilitate more than a dozen training opportunities in 2022. This most recent training, the American embassy says, is an example of the U.S. government's commitment to working with Guyanese security forces in promoting respect and protection of human rights in policing. Health Ministry says that 10 more persons died from COVID-19 over the past 5 days. Most of them were over 60 years. The vaccination status of 4 of them was not known. 3 of them were not vaccinated, 2 were fully vaccinated, and 1 was partially vaccinated. The Health Ministry says that of the 163 hospitalized persons, 20 are in the intensive care unit. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony stresses the need for persons to be fully vaccinated, including the booster, so that they can defend themselves against the Omicron variant.
This can all be prevented if people come out and get their vaccinations, first, second, or booster shots. And against Omicron, it's better for you to get all 3. The first one, the second one, and then get the booster, because without which you're not going to be protected. So I really want to urge people to do that. As you would see in the last couple of days, we would have seen an increase in hospitalization. It's going up gradually. But apart from the hospitalization, we are seeing that people are ending up with a severe form of COVID, and some of them have died from COVID.
Those ordered to isolate themselves at home now total 12,682. Guyana has now legislation governing organ transplants. Already, hospitals here have been transplanting kidneys, heart, and cornea. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says that with the passage of the organ transplant bill last night, Guyana now follows Trinidad and Tobago in becoming the second CARICOM state to have such a law. He says it is important that Guyana has that law.
It is important because since 2008, we've started to do kidney transplants, and then in 2014 we started doing corneal transplants. So this bill paves the way now to do it in a very structured way, using all the international best practices. And the hope is that once we have structured it this way, that instead of just doing corneal and kidney transplants, that we'll also be able to do other types of transplants.
Under the law, persons must give permission for their organs to be transplanted. In the case of a dead person, the next of kin will have to give permission. You are still with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM on Facebook and YouTube. It is 18 hours at 10. We now turn to news in the region. Hong Kong Customs have arrested 2 men after they confiscated $18 million worth of cocaine. Star News reports that the cargo of drugs was hidden in a container that arrived from Suriname. The shipping container, said to be carrying frozen meat, arrived at the Kwai Chung Custom House Cargo Examination Compound from South America on January 10. Based on information received from a foreign law enforcement agency, customs officials examined the container and discovered 104 packs of suspected cocaine hidden in the container's refrigerated compartment. Each pack weighed 1.3 kilograms. A law enforcement source said the 28-year-old would have helped with the logistics of shipping the container to Hong Kong, while the 33-year-old would be the recipient. In Hong Kong, trafficking a dangerous drug carries a life sentence and a $5 million Hong Kong dollar fine. In November, customs officials seized 147 million Hong Kong dollars worth of cocaine hidden in an electrical transformer arriving by plane from Guatemala. That's the largest seizure of the drug at Hong Kong International Airport in 2 decades. And in the Bahamas, the head of a fast-growing breakaway teachers union has welcomed the resumption of face-to-face learning. She says she and her members have no issues with the shift. She says the only remark was that they got information about schools being reopened late because people had it on Facebook before teachers or the administration. Ms. Major says the Minister of Education has since apologized and has taken responsibility for that. Ms. Major, a music teacher for 41 years, said the Bahamas Educators, Counselors and Allied Workers Union, BECAWU, was registered in October 2020 and began its membership drive in April 2021. The union's executives are mostly based in Grand Bahama. At 18 hours at 12, we now turn to international news from the BBC.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. President Biden has said he's prepared to impose sanctions on his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, directly if Moscow invades Ukraine. It's the first time that Western powers have suggested that the extra measures they've threatened against Moscow could go right to the top of the Kremlin. Mr. Biden also said the US troops placed on standby could move to Europe shortly, but that it was dependent on President Putin's next move.
What would lead to that is what's going to happen, what Putin does or doesn't do. And I may be moving some of those troops in the nearer term just because it takes time. And again, it's not provocative, it's just exactly what I said. If you notice, you don't see a lot of concern in our NATO allies in Western Europe, but in Eastern Europe there's reason for concern.
Downing Street has said that the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is willing to be interviewed by police officers investigating parties that may have breached coronavirus restrictions. A spokesman said the Prime Minister didn't believe he had broken the law. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, announced the investigation. Here's Ione Wells.
Dame Cressida Dick said officers were looking at a number of events in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations. She said the investigation was opened as a result of information from the inquiry being conducted by the senior civil servant Sue Gray and her officers' own judgments. Many Tory MPs were waiting for the Cabinet Office inquiry to be published this week before they made up their mind about whether to continue backing the Prime Minister. Now, Downing Street have said that parts of her inquiry will not be published until after the police investigation is completed. This has led to a mixed reaction from Tory backbench MPs.
Sri Lanka says it will pay compensation to more than 1 million rice farmers for the failure of their crops after the government banned the import of chemical fertilisers. Ministers said around $200 million would be available. Here's Anbarasan Nitarajan.
The Sri Lankan government last year attempted to convert the country into a 100% organic farming nation by banning imported chemical fertilizers. The decision triggered a wave of protests by farmers who said it would be difficult for them to shift to organic cultivation all of a sudden. The restrictions were lifted months later, and the government has allowed the private sector to import fertilizers. But the decision was too late for the current farming season. Fearing a shortfall in production, the government has also decided to import 300,000 tons of rice.
The US Coast Guard says it's looking for 39 people missing after a boat reportedly capsized off Florida. The accident occurred on Saturday, but a survivor was rescued on Tuesday. He said the vessel had sailed from the Bahamas, but had run into bad weather. World news from the BBC. The International Monetary Fund has downgraded its forecast for the global economy. It's trimmed 0.5 point off global growth, saying the world's two biggest economies, the United States and China, won't be immune. Geeta Gopinath explained the reasoning behind that projection.
We project global growth this year at 4.4%, which is 0.5 percentage point lower than previously forecast, mainly because of downgrades for the United States and China.
But India and Japan are forecast to buck the trend, although the IMF says Omicron will continue to be a drag on growth. The US automotive giant General Motors says it's making the biggest single investment in its history, pumping $7 billion into its home state of Michigan as it ramps up the production of electric vehicles. It says the move will create 4,000 new jobs. The former head of a Swiss bank has been justifying some of his large business expenses at the start of a fraud trial in Zurich. Pierin Vincenz, who ran Raiffeisen Switzerland, said that more than $200,000 spent in visits to strip clubs was largely business-related. As for a dinner costing more than $700 with a woman he'd met on a dating app, he said he'd been considering employing her. He faces charges of fraud and embezzlement, all of which he denies. All 4 teams playing in Tuesday's games at the Africa Cup of Nations football tournament have observed minutes of silence for the 8 people who died in a stampede before a match on Monday. The Confederation of African Football said no more matches would be played at the stadium in Yaoundé, which had been scheduled to stage the final of the competition. On the pitch, Senegal beat Cape Verde 2-0 to book their ticket to the quarter-finals, as did Morocco, who beat Malawi 2-1. BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
After a hard day's work, delicious comfort food is all we crave for. There at KFC, they've got you covered with a wide choice of delicious, finger-licking good meals from any of their 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence. And there are 6 drive-through locations for your convenience. Their 11 herbs and spices are sure to blow those post-work vibes away every time. It's the perfect way to end a hard day. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
To end the news, here's a recap of the highlights. David Granger and Joseph Harmon have stepped down from APNU. In the region, Hong Kong authorities have busted a shipment of meat with cocaine from Suriname. And internationally, President Joe Biden has threatened to impose sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin if Russia invades Ukraine. The news came to you compliments of KFC. It's finger-licking good.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.